is Software Meets Business, a podcast sponsored by Head Channel.
Welcome to another excellent episode of Software Meets Business, and today I am excited to have David Glennie, who's the CEO at Voodoo Park. Hi, David.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, actually. And yourself?
Yeah, very good, very good. Excited to get into this episode. I wanted to start off, just give a bit of background about yourself and where you came from, as in, I noticed, you've had quite a long career. So maybe sort of talk a little bit about the beginning of that career.
That's basically what you're saying is.
No, experience is where
you're quite old. How did you get here?
We're experienced.
My experience. So how did I get here? So I founded Voodoo 13 years ago this year. So it's been going for 13 years. Prior to that, I was what was my job title? I was Chief Innovation Officer and Group Product Director, something like that, at a mobile specific agency when those were things that existed, when mobile was a category. And then before that, I worked in a software house, but I didn't actually have a proper job till I was about 31. So prior to that, I used to work in care. So I worked for the National Statistics Society. And before that, I was a musician. And before that, I was an actor. And before that, I was at school. So I didn't do anything proper. So I haven't been to university or anything. I did a year with the Open University, which is how I managed to blag a job as a developer.
Well,
because I look like a developer. So
yes.
I've got that kind of slightly scruffy look that people go, he's probably a software developer. So I got a job purely on vibes, I think.
I like it. Vibe hiring. It's a new thing.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah.
So you were quite creative.
Yeah.
And then you went into software.
Yes, I know. Why? So money would definitely be like one reason. Like they pay you to do software. Like this. So this was kind of like turn of the century, and it was a super cool thing to be getting into. I'd sort of missed all the fun, in that the internet was kind of already there, and also that kind of bit when everything was exploding and everything. I wasn't around for that. I kind of came in a bit after that, but kind of fell into it because like money. That's like, as I said, like a significant reason for doing something. And it's so it is creative, but in a nerdy way, which is very similar to the way that music is creative and quite similar to the way that acting is creative. They're kind of problem-solving nerdy things. And this was just like a whole series of problem-solving nerdy things. And then I found, I really like this. So I sort of took to it. I took to it quite quickly. Yeah.
They say it's the intersection of art and science, don't they? And there's a really good book by Paul Graham called Hackers and Painters, which if you haven't read it, you should. Yeah, you should definitely read it. Yeah, very good book. Well, look, anyway, let's talk a little bit about where you've got to now, because obviously Voodoo Park been going for 13 years, I think you said. So the title of this one is Your Journey into Transparent AI for Finance.
Yeah. So
do you want to kind of get us started on that?
Well, when I set up the company, so I set up the company 13 years ago. I did it because so I left my perfectly nice job, and I actually very briefly joined a startup. And then that worked. So it was basically like Uber about 3 weeks before Uber. So we were wiped out completely in about 2 months. But when I first set up Voodoo, it was around the idea of AI. So at the time, there was a lot of excitement about. So it was sort of when.
You couldn't say AI back in the day. You had to say machine learning, though, didn't you?
Machine learning. Well, no. Yes. So I'm trying to think of an example. Yeah, you would have said machine learning, wouldn't you? Remember, Microsoft brought out the thing that could guess your age. It's
yeah. When the flash went off and it worked out the speed at your iris responds.
Yeah. Is that how it worked?
Oh, you mean the face recognition one to work?
Yeah.
Oh, there was not. Yeah, sorry, there was.
Yeah, there's another one. You upload a picture and it tells you your age.
Yes, I do remember that one as well.
And
sorry, there was two.
That's a neural network. It's like a trained neural network, right? And so that was, and at the time, everyone thought that AI was going to be visioning was going to be the first major use case. So, and we thought, oh, this is very exciting. Lots of people want to talk to us about it, and that was cool. And then it sort of wasn't, because they had awful ideas, and I can't tell you what they are because it involves saying who the customers are. But they had terrible, horrible, brutal, immoral things that people wanted to do with this technology. But they also didn't have any money for any of it. So we were basically just there to sort of go and do workshops and make people feel clever. And then we then pivoted just in engineering, because that's really easy to sell and buy, right? And that's what we did. And then it kind of 2019, I think. So it was before the pandemic. So it was about 2019. We started playing in earnest with the stuff that was coming out. Then, so what would that been? GPT-2?
Mm-hmm.
And which, so GPT-1 was 2018, 2 was 2019. At the end of 2019, you could download it.
Right.
Because when it first came out, you weren't allowed to use it because they were worried it would be dangerous. They've kind of changed their minds about this since then.
A little bit.
They've changed their mind.
Changed their minds a little bit. Yeah. In fact, they're just connecting it to everything.
It's just an arms race. Let's be honest. So, but it was like, that came down, and it was because the thing that got really exciting in 2019 was temperature. That was the buzzword.
Oh, right.
So, being able to change the temperature in order to make the models more "quote unquote" creative, and suddenly that started bringing back results that were like, whoa, that's much, before it was a bit autocomplete-y, and you kind of go, yeah, of course it says that. But now it's kind of like, oh, we're going somewhere. It looks a lot more like thought and discernment and that sort of stuff. So, and then you think, well, if you're playing with the temperature a lot and then trying to ask it kind of logical questions, can it manipulate and stuff like this? And it sort of could, sort of couldn't. But there's definitely a sense there that this is going to happen, and this technology this is going to sort of kick off. And then, a few years later, they brought out chat, and it went insane one Christmas holidays. But it was just the whole thing blew up. But so we started sort of playing with it around then. By this time, we'd established ourselves as a maker of software for the financial services community. So our customers are the makers of they're like big fintechs, basically. Right? And we're looking at this technology, and kind of this is going to be of huge interest to our customer set. They're going to think it's brilliant. But there are so many fundamental problems, or one massive fundamental problem, is that it's completely opaque.
Yes.
It is. At the end of the day, it is just huge matrices of numbers that get multiplied together. There's no kind of like, if such and such, then such and such that you can point to. So if someone comes back and goes, why did we refuse this person a mortgage? Or why did we buy that stock? You just have to kind of point to the box and shrug, right? So kind of thinking, yeah, this is going to mean that they won't be able to use it to its fullest capability. It'll just end up being kind of a fringe activity, unless we can think of ways of solving that. And that's when we started thinking about transparency. This is when we started what is now called agentic AI, which is the name. I think we were kind of like active. But we started thinking about using it to control other systems. So we started thinking about that in sort of 2019, and we thought we'd have a usable platform, in about a year. And here we are in 2025, and we are now within weeks releasing it, but it's a much bigger problem.
Yeah, it was a much harder problem to solve than it looked like at the start. Right?
Yes, and also like as well as being like this is a very complicated problem. The other thing that's super fun is, and the whole world is spinning so fast. So like the stuff happening, so stuff is evolving kind of like under your feet all the time. So like we had to make a decision recently early on that we're not going to lean on any, for instance, libraries that do stuff. So people bring out libraries that do loads of really, really useful things, but the velocity with which they change, and they don't necessarily use the same paradigms because it's all being made up, right? It's like the Wild West again. It's like turn of the century with digital, with the internet, right? Everyone's making it up. We're literally doing invention. So you get this thing that does RAG, and you go, great, well that's central. This RAG is perfectly adequate. And we'll get this thing that does Landgraph, does thinking, and then they develop in different directions. And now we're spending most of our time trying to intermediate between these two things, which have different models of the universe. And so we had to really start thinking we need to do it all ourselves, because at least it will stay kind of in
stable.
At least we say it's stable, right? And so that sort of like created like a load more work, and just a sort of complexity of the problem. And pretty quickly, I think, it only took us a few months to sort of get a grasp on what the solution would be. But then the actualities of making that work were way more uphill than we thought. And I think, and that's got a lot to do with working with a kind of technology that doesn't behave the way that developers are used to. Working.
Yeah.
I mean,
you don't put an input in and get exactly the same output every time.
No, it's literally the worst version of it works on my machine you can ever imagine, because it will literally do something 100 times and then like one time so like literally the opposite. You can get stuff like that. We spent so long learning how to remove some of the magic. Is there any way to, you know what I mean? It's take away some of this amazing capability and try and replace it with something a lot more sort of potato-y and kind of like, because a lot of the time I actually do need you to just always answer that question like this, please. Because it's really important to all these other processes that rely on you. So don't suddenly get better at it. Or don't go and another thing, which is its favorite thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're building so this is a large agentic platform. I'm allowed to say that word.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of, in my notes, I've got, building in intelligent services from just job descriptions. So do you just put in a bunch of job descriptions and it then builds out a bunch of analogues of people to then go and do that work? Or is that the vision?
Pretty close to that, and that's what it does. That so my PA is Amy, and I've set up in Amy. I've kind of created an agent that is my PA. The job descriptions thing comes from the work we were doing earlier on, where we're trying to find ways of thinking about this technology that didn't limit the capability of the technology, right? So that we didn't just end up building a series of point solutions. So trying to think broader and wider, maintaining a broad and wide perspective. And so we started to think about not an application that does a thing, but like a person that has a role, because a role may involve a lot of things, and also those things might change. Those changes might be temporary or permanent, and you might get better at them over time, and you might suggest changes to how they're done, right? So things like a person, we start thinking more like we're trying to create that capability. Then the thing that is what we call like the job description is basically, it's like the job description you give to a person. You say the purpose of your role is these things, and within each of these things, these are the goals for those particular purposes. Here's a list of things that are absolutely true. We have the concept of tenets. These things are absolutely true, and anything that tells you otherwise is dangerous or you're wrong.
Yeah.
So you tell it these are the things that are always absolutely true. And then like a like a person, you can give it guidance, which is always remember when you're sending an email to sign it with your name or something like that. There's a piece of guidance that you would maybe give to a new employee or something. And then it also has memory, which is very similar to kind of RAG-like vector memory, but we built the system ourselves so that it would integrate with what we do. But while it's doing things, it's also seeing if it remembers anything that's appropriate, and you can tell it to remember things. And so you can give it memory that then helps it do it. And you can also give it documentation. And we deal with documentation in a different way to the way that we deal with memory. So we don't all up into vectors. You give it the document, it reads the document and summarizes it for itself. And then when appropriate, it goes, oh, I've got a document that will be useful to help me with this. I'll go and open that document, find the right bit, read it.
Yeah, it brings it into its context window rather than leaving it back.
Exactly, into its context window specifically. And that is much more like the way that humans work, or how you manage work for humans. Like, don't forget, John is off next week, so you're going to need to ask someone else for approval. And here's a document of how we do month end. And here's a bit of guidance about, never format a spreadsheet in this font.
Yeah.
So never use
like long and short-term memory, basically, to kind of like simulating long and short-term memory.
Yes.
In some ways.
Yes. Yeah. And that all came from all of that stuff that we were doing kind of in the early days when we were trying to find analogs and analogies that we could use to solve the problem of transparency. This is when we started. We came up with, we have this concept of sentinels, which is basically other thought processes that are outside of the model. They're in other models, per se, but all have a shared context in which the conversation between them all is sort of happening. And that's what makes the thought process transparent, is that we don't have any meta thinking being done in the model. The meta thinking is being done outside of the model, and we don't ask a model to do things, we ask it how to do things.
Let me just interrupt this podcast for a few seconds. I just wanted to let you know about our wonderful sponsor, Head Channel. Head Channel builds software engineering teams, and they've been building software for clients since 2003. They have a very simple engagement model. Either they develop and run it, or they build it and you run it. They could also help with finding a fractional CTO if you need that support. You can find them at headchannel.co.uk. And now back to the podcast.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because I was going to come on to that, because that's obviously where, because you're operating in regulated environments, you need to have that. You need to be able to show the thinking, I suppose. Is that the right way of putting it?
Yes. Yeah, it needs to be sort of transparent, but also attributable. Mm-hmm. So you go, well, these are the reasons. So if we were, if a decision was made, why did that person get this particular piece of, say, financial advice or something? You can go back to the actual session, and you can see the he said, she said's of it, but you can also see kind of why. So it was this particular memory that said, oh, if it's, I don't know, if it's a Tuesday, the answer is always 7. That particular memory, you can get to that memory, you can see how that memory was created, and you can go to the conversation in which that memory was created and see who it was with, and then go, well, it was that person that told it, if it's a Tuesday, it's always 7. That person is accountable for that piece of information. And you can do that with every step of the conversation, and every system call and every piece of data that's retrieved is stored in that sort of huge debug. That means you can actually unwind and say, well, we know why it made a particular decision. That accountability was sort of the thing that we were most trying to achieve, and that was the thing that was simple in principle turned out to be unbelievably hard in practice.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, and so that kind of helps that the product that you're building through its visibility and the fact you've got audit logs on everything, which is great, isn't it? So, but I suppose that brings us back to the fact that you need all of that because it is non-deterministic. It comes out with different things based on the same inputs. So, and you said earlier that was interesting to wrap your head around. I don't know, I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult when. So as a thing to play with, absolutely fantastic. As a technology that you're trying to build into a product, that is kind of like more challenging. There are loads of things we can do, like with tuning, which we're working on our own model, and so that's being tuned in order to, so it now is a lot more sort of lot more constrained than the public facing sort of models are. But it still is a technology, and certainly in the early days when we were just working off other people's models, trying to build this and get it to work, it would work 99 times, and then one time just do the exact opposite of what you'd expected for absolutely no reason. It's just it's a kind of a different mindset. It's like when the internet came along, we had to learn a whole new set of paradigms.
Yes.
Right? All kinds of like weird stuff that you had to do in browsers where the first thing it does is it does a callback to itself and all this kind of weird stuff. And I was like, why are we doing this? It's insane.
So why is this the weirdest and most interesting project?
Why is this the most weird? So I think like first of all, when we first started trying to, like, sort of 2019, and we're starting to do the thinking, and we had to come up with unlike most sort of like technical projects where you get together on a whiteboard and you're drawing boxes that do things. So there'll be a database and something will come out or something. We found that we're spending a lot of time thinking about thinking and thinking about method acting and thinking about. So we came up with things like. If you had a spreadsheet of loads and loads of data and you had a board meeting and you wanted to know the propensity for something to happen as a percentage, and you just went and gave it to your data analyst, and then they gave it to you and said it's 27%, and you said brilliant. You went into the board meeting and then you said there's the data and the propensity is 27%, and someone in the board meeting said amazing, could you explain how you arrived at that? And you'd be like, I literally have no idea, right? It's a number. And we started with that as a kind of, well, that's a paradigm, right? So how would you fix that if you were thinking in the real world? So when you're working kind of with like more traditional digital, it's a lot of like looking at real world problems and then trying to imagine how you'd fix them digitally. What we found, like working with AI, is you're doing almost the opposite process. So you're kind of like trying to bring things out here where you can think about them better, as opposed to like where you can, as opposed to doing the exact opposite for digital. So you end up with solving that problem going, well, what you would do is you'd go to the data scientist and say, look, I've got this spreadsheet and I need to know the propensity for something. What's the first thing I should do? And they'll say, oh, well, look, your dates are in different formats. The first thing you're going to do is go clean up your data. So just go and get all those dates and say, oh, brilliant. So you go and do that and you come back and you say, what's my next step? And they say, oh, multiply by this or whatever. And so by the time you get to your board meeting and they go, why is it 27? You go, well, I know because I cleaned the data and I did this and I did this and I did this. So you've still taken all of the value of that human labor, but it's not been expressed as work. It was expressed as the transfer of information. And then that was kind of like a breakthrough moment for us. We're kind of going, right, we need to take everything that we ask an AI to do and not ask it to do it. It's not what's the answer to this question, it's how would you answer this question? What are the steps to answering the question? We need to find that kind of approach. And then there was lots of stuff about, like I said, like method acting and stuff. So there's a lot of processes in method acting that are kind of designed to give you the sensation of somebody else's thoughts, right? So it's like, that must be a really interesting, that must be useful because that's the way that we can structure all the things that once fitted together would kind of simulate thought. So then we started to think about things like inner monologues and narratives and objectives and super objectives and that sort of things, and obstacles and wants and means and all those things that come from that completely different world, but that create like friction, which in acting is the sensation of being someone else, but in our world is the visible interplay of ideas. So that bit was fabulous. It was probably the most fun, I think I've ever had, because it's just literally mad, and it's a bit like what it must have been like at the beginning of the internet, right? Because it's, which I missed, but because no one has the answers, right? It's not kind of, you don't get a Stack Overflow. You're kind of, you're just kind of improvising and making stuff up. So that bit's like really, that's fascinating, exciting, and sort of pseudo-philosophical. And then we did like initial POC and then another POC, and kept increasing complexity and getting closer to work with the POCs. And that's R&D, and that's fab, because it only has to prove the point. And there is such a huge distance between prove the point and do the thing, right? R&D is literally the most fun. I used to have a job which was R&D, and it is absolutely brilliant for that kind of reason. It's not true that it doesn't, you don't have any outputs. You really do, and you really are under pressure. But you're only proving the concept. You're not actually making an actual thing you can put your hand on that will, not every time. Do you know what I mean? It only has to prove it works, not every time. And the sort of the transition out of that with this kind of technology, that's where all the challenge came.
It's so interesting that a discipline like acting is actually so useful for tackling this technical challenge.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
It is, but this is like when we're talking about, it's not the specialist of the AI engineer or the data scientist. It's developers who can reach a little bit further across the line into something else. It's bringing in these other disciplines. I was at like an event, and loads of us in the AI sort of developing AI world will sort of talk. And the guy that I found most useful, I thought, at the meeting was this guy who was literally a linguist. That was his background, and now he was running an AI company. And he was batting down people who were saying, but it's not really thinking, is it? It's just doing stuff with language. And he's going, like, you have obviously not studied linguistics. Like, all of our thought is language, like language and thought inextricably linked. And he was not from a technical background. Now he's running an AI company because it really crosses over with his other sort of set of
If you can find developers who've done improv.
Yes, that's what you want. You want exactly. You want stand-up comedians. So that's quite a small demographic, right? And they would literally not be very funny. But yes, you want developers. Or just like, I know there is kind of a thing, because it's a kind of nerdiness, but it's just a slightly different kind of nerdiness.
Yeah.
It's a kind of it's a philosophical kind of, the amount of hours we spent debating whether or not artificial sentience is actually possible is, we could have built this thing twice over in the amount of time that we get rabbit-holed by that. And it's not, it's not everybody that is susceptible to spending hours thinking about that, but a certain kind of person is, and a certain kind of developer is drawn to the sort of the legitimately unknown.
So what's next? Because
next?
Yeah, because you obviously the platform's not very far away.
Yeah. No, but we're using it, and we're bringing it to market sort of like imminently. We've done a few kind of friendly show and tells, and we're going to start doing a little bit more real live fire kind of show and tell with people that have expressed an interest in becoming customers and this, that, and the other. I'm hugely, you just got to be so careful because there is so much bullshit out that you like Builder. Do you see Builder.ai?
Yeah.
Yeah. 700 developers in India, that was.
The Fireship video is good on that. The Fireship video is hilarious. But anyway, yes.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
The Fireship video is
cut it in now. But yeah, because it turned out to be 700 Indian developers in a raincoat. It's
I know.
Like, oh. And like every time they do it, it's very funny, and they were valued at over $1 billion. And it's very funny. It's not very sad. People lost their jobs, whatever. But ha ha ha. But also, that's a damaging proof point, right? That's increased people's kind of like, yeah, but is it really?
Yeah, reticence.
And so we're rocking up going, oh look, it's transparent. It does this, that, and the other. It's the first truly Horizon 2 AI platform. Blah, 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 blah. And if it's even remotely shonky, I just have this thing where people go, yeah, no, it's not.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's just another one.
Where do you think we are on the hype cycle then? Are we in the trough of disillusionment or going into it?
No, I don't think we are. I think so the difficult part of the question is, who do you mean by we? So there was the idea that everything had changed overnight and all work was going to be fundamentally transformed and our economy was going to be transformed. I think all those things are true, but they happen at wildly different paces depending where you are.
Yeah.
So where you and I sit, literally the only thing people talk to us about is AI, right? It's like, oh, this is the topic, every dinner party, everything you ever do, that's happening. That is not the case everywhere, and it doesn't touch all forms of work. And there are whole sectors of the economy that kind of hope it just blows over.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. I think we're in that. I think in terms of the hype cycle, I think there are multiple cycles going on. I think we're about to, I would say this because I think it's an opportunity for Voodoo. I think we're about to get to the point where everyone will realize that 27 point solutions in their business over which they have minimal control, but it's all right because apparently they're all from Microsoft or a Microsoft aligned company. It's probably all right. I think that's going to become problematic. And I think people are going to want to have more control. I think people are going to want to centralize and think strategically about AI instead of thinking opportunistically. I think that change will happen. And there'll be, at that point, a sort of a culling of lots and lots of point solutions in favor of the sort of Horizon 2 or the one AI that does everything in your company type approach, including working with other AIs that are incumbent, that Amy represents. I think that's kind of the next move, and I think that will be disruptive, and I think that presents huge challenges to large-scale organizations, not just in terms of implementation, but in terms of things like they don't know how to buy these things yet. Procurement do not know how to procure these things yet. There's a lot of confusion. One of the reasons that Amy is kind of model agnostic is because, in early kind of like kicking it around conversations with friendly customers, they were saying things like, but it'll be the Microsoft model, won't it? And you want to go, okay, so that's not a thing, but I know exactly what you mean. And they're saying, because in Azure, you can just turn that on and we'll be allowed to have that. But if it was our own model, where we are now in 2025, procurement, I'm like, we don't know how to be okay by a model, right? We don't know how to do that. We don't know how to have it, but we know it's okay to switch this on because it's just part of our Microsoft subscription, so it's probably fine. So I think we've got all of that stuff to grow through. But I've not hit disappointment or disillusion with it, and I've been splashing around in it for about 6 years, and I'm
luckily I'm old enough to remember the paperless office.
Yeah, man.
So, and we're still dealing with paper. Not so much.
Are you? Because like we're remote, fully remote, and have been for 13 years. So like way before it was fashionable.
Yeah, we
were fully remote. So the only paper we ever have is if I have to sign
contracts.
Year end. Yeah, and then scan it, and then send it, and then shred it. That's the only process, which kind of which is really good for us because it means everything is already systematized. So when we start bringing in, our data is already all in the right place. Do you know what I mean? We don't have that sort of horrible problem that all our customers have. So when we started bringing in agentic AI, we can just connect it to these systems, and there you are. There's 13 years of records because there aren't any filing cabinets anywhere, and it's all in proper platforms. It's not in weird old versions of Excel or anything, because we were always fully remote from 2012.
David, it's been great talking to you. Where can people find out more about the agentic platform?
They could go to our website, but don't go too quickly because it's not live yet. But they could look at voodoopark.com. They could say hi there.
Great.
And there'll be noise about it soon.
On the social.
On the socials, yeah. LinkedIn, where nobody ever goes.
Yes. Well,
yes.
David, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed it, appreciate it, and good luck with the platform, and hopefully speak to you again.
Yeah. See you soon.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Software Meets Business, the podcast sponsored by Head Channel. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a rating and review on your preferred platform.